Today we are cutting deep into Steve Coll's remarkable book, The Achilles Trap. We're talking Saddam Hussein, the CIA, and really the decades of misjudgment that laid the groundwork for the 2003 Iraq invasion.
Absolutely. It's quite a story.
Our mission here is to look far beyond just the immediate post-9/11 run-up. We really need to understand the fundamental sort of cyclical erosion of trust and the confirmation bias that over 20 years pretty much guaranteed the final conflict.
Yeah.
This isn't just history. This is how psychological warfare and paranoia can become these self-fulfilling prophecies.
And if you're trying to understand how this conflict truly originated, you really have to accept that successive American administrations fundamentally misjudged Saddam.
Right.
They often just reduced him to this singular, two-dimensional cartoon autocrat. But sources, like Coll's book, paint a picture of someone who was complex, ruthlessly cruel, certainly, and pathologically fixated on American and Israeli power. He was just impossible to reduce to a simple explanation.
Okay, so let's unpack his world a bit, starting with the chilling efficiency of his police state. It might have looked unsubtle from the outside, but it was horrifyingly effective, wasn't it?
Oh, definitely.
His inner circle had key figures, like his half-brother and spy chief, Barzan al-Tikritis, and his main external guy, Tariq Aziz.
And the book uses Barzan's own words, which really convey the regime's totalitarian reach. He once actually boasted, not even an Iraqi sitting in a cafe in a remote part of Japan would feel safe if he spoke disparagingly of Saddam and our regime.
Wow.
And that wasn't just bluster, it was the foundation of the pervasive fear that kept the whole machine running.
And the management style. Lethally arbitrary. This is where it gets really interesting, I think. That anecdote about the health minister, Riyad Ibrahim Hussein.
Oh, yeah.
Rumors flew that Saddam just shot him dead right outside a cabinet meeting for suggesting he stepped down temporarily.
Which wasn't even true, was it?
No, the actual truth, the book says, was more prosaic, quote unquote. He was accused of importing bad medicine and executed later. But the fact that the rumor of an instant violent cabinet execution circulated and was widely believed, well, it just shows how arbitrary and lethal Ba'athist justice became Saddam's key management tool. Fear was governance.
Absolutely. And that cruelty existed right alongside this really weird juxtaposition of luxury.
The cigars.
Yeah, he's smoking Cuban cigars at cabinet meetings, making jokes like, we are going to give you something bourgeois, but it is from a socialist country. But then you look at the true cost. The regime literally consumed its own talent.
We see that clash so clearly in his nuclear program, don't we? You had Jafar, the program leader who went along with it, versus the Canadian-educated physicist Hussein al-Shahrastani, who refused to help build a bomb and was tortured and imprisoned for it.
And Shahrastani's arrest was like a thunderbolt for the elite. Jafar, even though he was the trusted head of the program, immediately moved his own sons out of Iraq, enrolled them back at his old boarding school, Seaford College, in England.
Just like that.
Yeah. It shows that even the most powerful and scientifically indispensable Iraqis knew the regime could turn on them at any moment. That internal structural paranoia is just crucial because it defined how Saddam interacted with the outside world, too.
Exactly. That internal paranoia then becomes external suspicion. And the first big test of that was back in 1982, right, at the start of the U.S. tilt toward Iraq during the Iran-Iraq War.
This is a remarkable detail from the book. A CIA operations officer, Tom Tweeten, was flown in secretly on a Jordanian private jet.
Wow.
His mission, straight from the White House, was to persuade Saddam to accept a purely secret, highly classified gift, satellite imagery of Iranian battle positions, and the instructions were explicit. Do not ask for anything in return. Just give it to him.
An offer of immediate military advantage, no strings attached, you'd think he'd jump at it.
But instead, his reaction was immediate and deeply suspicious. Why would the U.S. just give him something so valuable? He thought they were playing both sides, or maybe doctoring the imagery to promote a military stalemate. He actually told his advisors, America has two faces.
Okay, but here's the thing. His paranoia wasn't entirely baseless, was it?
No, not entirely. He knew, or at least he strongly suspected, that covert Israeli arms deals with Iran were already happening.
Which turned out to be true later.
Exactly. So, from Saddam's perspective, if Israel was selling arms to his enemy, Iran, surely the CIA must know about it, which made the American gift look incredibly suspect, right? He saw the U.S. not as a potential ally, but as this dangerous manipulator trying to control the war's outcome for its own ends.
So if that initial suspicion was like a seed, then the Iran-Contra scandal, just 4 years later in '86, that was the catalyst. That turned his suspicion into absolute certainty of betrayal.
Completely. When the news broke that the U.S. was secretly selling weapons to Iran, Saddam Hussein was, as the book puts it, perhaps the world's least surprised leader.
He had his proof now.
He saw it as definitive evidence of this conspiracy involving the U.S., Israel, and Iran all working against him. But Coll's sources reveal a far more direct betrayal than just selling arms.
What was that?
The White House explicitly instructed the CIA to provide Iran with intelligence about Iraqi battlefield positions. We're talking a detailed map showing units, troops, tanks, electronic installations.
Wait, hang on. So the U.S. is giving Saddam satellite photos with one hand while secretly handing Iran a map of his defenses with the other. That's beyond manipulation. That's just deliberate treachery.
That's how Saddam saw it. And Coll argues this act rendered unreliable 3 whole years of American diplomatic assurances.
Understandably.
It completely sealed the deal. Iraqi leaders were utterly convinced that the accurate intelligence the CIA gave Iran, compared to the possibly doctored intelligence they gave Iraq, allowed Iran to win the really decisive battle for Fa. Trust wasn't just damaged, it was irreparably broken. From then on, deception was just the expected language between Baghdad and Washington.
Which then brings us forward to 1990 and the whole lead up to the Kuwait invasion. There's that famous meeting between Ambassador April Glaspie and Saddam.
The one where he just talked and talked.
Yeah, this huge monologue. And when Glaspie finally got a word in, she delivered what was the established U.S. policy line at the time. We have no opinion on the Arab conflicts, like your border disagreement with Kuwait.
Now, her polite language, you could argue, was a diplomatic misstep. Maybe she failed to convey how serious the U.S. response might be. But the book concludes that the blame later dumped on her was grossly unjustified.
Because she was just stating policy.
She was just relaying the standing policy. But Saddam, hearing that, seems to have taken it as a green light, or at least not a red one.
And all this time, Saddam was still obsessed with getting weapons, primarily to deter Israel.
Yes. Even though the CIA predicted back in the mid-'80s that Iraq was still at least a decade away from nukes, he was secretly pushing hard for his own indigenous program.
Which leads us into the whole post-Gulf War deception cycle. This is where Iraq's long history of hiding things becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy for the U.S.
Absolutely. Hussein Kamel's defection in 1995 was a bombshell. It revealed the shocking scale of the biological weapons program they'd destroyed without keeping records, stuff like 166 bombs and 25 missile warheads loaded with germ agents. All gone, no proof.
And the hiding of evidence. It sounds almost comical if the context wasn't so deadly serious. Jafar told Hussein Kamel they couldn't possibly hide these giant 15-foot-wide Calitron iron discs.
These massive things used for enriching uranium, just enormous.
Too big to hide.
Yet Kamel ordered the Republican Guard to bury them anyway. And this, the book argues, was seen by the U.S. as clear, even cartoonish evidence that Iraq was cheating and lying. This pattern just fundamentally conditioned America to believe with absolute certainty that Saddam would never stop deceiving them.
Which sets the stage perfectly for the ultimate fatal misjudgment in the lead up to 2003. And the irony here is just staggering.
It really is.
Because the source, Coll's book, confirms that by then Saddam didn't have WMD. There's that moment where Ali asks Saddam directly, "Do we have WMD?" And Saddam's reply was simply, "No."
But that was his strategic bind, you see. His Achilles Trap, as the title suggests. He believed he needed the U.S. and the whole region to think he had something in his hand, secret weapons, to deter an invasion.
So he was bluffing.
Essentially. But by late 2002, with inspectors breathing down his neck, he apparently decided he needed to clear things up to pass the UN inspections. Jafar, the nuclear physicist, actually spoke directly to UN and U.S. officials, stating plainly, "Iraq does not possess weapons of mass destruction. If someone tells you otherwise, they are lying."
But nobody believed him by then.
Exactly. You have the U.S. intelligence community, completely primed by decades of Saddam's lies, the Iran-Contra betrayal, the hiding of evidence. They were convinced that this declaration of truth was just the deepest, most elaborate layer of deception yet.
They were looking for confirmation, not truth.
They were convinced he was hiding WMD, relying often on circumstantial evidence that fit their pre-existing conviction. Remember, President Clinton had already concluded years earlier that Saddam still has the makings of an arsenal. The bias was set.
So the consequence of that long history of calculated deception is just heartbreaking, really.
It is. Saddam's own strategy to appear strong by deceiving the world ultimately created the perfect justification, the appearance of an urgent, existential threat. That the Bush administration felt it needed to make the invasion decisions seem strategically sound. He spent decades crafting this mask of threat, and in the end, that mask became his Achilles trap. It led directly to his downfall.
It's the long game of profound misjudgment we've been talking about, right from that first CIA gift that just fueled Saddam's mistrust to the disastrous cycle of mutual deception that led, inevitably it seems, to the final invasion.
And it's incredible what he was doing right at the very end. Even as coalition forces were preparing to strike in 2003, Saddam was apparently consumed by his narrative. He was busy editing his novel.
Get out, damned one.
That's the one. A story set in ancient Babylon, filled with these crude anti-Semitic and anti-Kurdish allegories, really reflecting his isolated, paranoid worldview. At the same time, he was sending out handwritten instructions to his generals on how to form small, decentralized guerrilla units for the long war.
The book reveals that right before the invasion actually began, Saddam's translator was still receiving tens of handwritten pages for the novel. Just think about that for a moment.
Yeah.
You have a dictator facing the absolute end of his regime, and he isn't taking refuge in command centers or bunkers. He's absorbed in writing fiction, allegorizing his enemies as devils and demons. So here's the thought to leave you with. If a ruler's final actions are consumed by literary composition and myth-making, what does that tell you about the real value they placed on pragmatic survival versus cementing their own historical narrative?